Hello YouTube. I'm going to talk about my investigation of the legends concerning ancient Asian underground cities and some of those people who try to find the cities. Strange tales, strange people, and a lot of golden blood found and lost in the process. Exotic places, and trust me, we still don't have all the details, but those cities may still be under deserts of Mongolia and other places. So let me tell you something that very few people know about in the West. It's a fascinating story, and I do want to ask you forgiveness for the quality of my voice. I do cough sometimes. I had flu, so I'm getting over it. But I did want to bring this story to you. And I want to start with Anton Ferdinand Ossendowski, whose life was full of adventures, intrigues, and mysteries. He was a scientist who led geological explorations in the Russian Empire. He was a journalist and author, a Polish revolutionary who served and did hard labor in Tsarist prisons. He was also explorer of Asia, who some believe was actually a spy for the Entente, the people who were fighting against the Reds during the Russian Revolution. From the West European side. Destiny brought him to Siberia, where he later served Admiral Kolchak's anti-Soviet government. Ossendowski, the future and extremely popular writer, fled from Red Army to Mongolia. And in Mongolia, the Russian general Baron Ungern von Sternberg met Ossendowski in 1920. They met at the nomadic Mongol monastery Bangur by river Orkhon. Later, the Polish adventurer was a guest of this man who was known as the Bloody Baron, among other things. They visited a lama in another monastery who predicted that Ungern would die in 130 days. Ossendowski was told that he, in turn, would die when Ungern would remind him that the time has come to die. So both visitors did not take this prediction seriously. Ungern gave the Pole, who became his advisor and helped with intelligence gathering, a bag with gold coins for Ungern's spouse in Beijing. The Baron was executed by communists 130 days after the visit. Ossendowski returned to Poland in 1922. That year he published his book, Beasts, Men and Gods. I highly recommend that you read it if you can. I mean, it's available in English and other languages. This book was about the Bloody Baron and Asia. Ossendowski described Mongolia and the underground country of Agharti, located in the bowels below the Gobi Desert. Some Russian researchers believe that the German occultist Thule Gesellschaft Society paid close attention to the book, and later the evil Nazi Institute and organization Ahnenerbe, or the Bureau for Study of Ancestral Heritage, used it for their poisonous metaphysical ideology. Several SS expeditions were dispatched with the goal of reaching Tibet, Shambhala, the Gobi Desert, and Agharti. Excuse me. In 1944, Ossendowski left the burning Warsaw behind, where Nazis just put down a mass rebellion. Ossendowski was involved with the anti-Nazi resistance. Early in January of 1945, the villa where he was hiding was visited by a German counterintelligence officer, Lieutenant Dollar, who demanded to see the writer immediately. Others in the house were told that they would be killed instantly should they try to listen to the conversation. Ossendowski gave him a copy of his book, Beasts, the one that I mentioned. Well, the officer left, and 2 days later Ossendowski died. It was determined that this Dollar was actually Baron von Ungern, nephew of the executed Bloody Baron, and his only heir. There are reports regarding the NKVD or the KGB digging up the body of their enemy, Asendovsky, in mid-January of 1945 to make sure that the author of books against Lenin and Soviet regime, adventurer Asendovsky, was finally dead. Stalin ordered that he be executed, and the secret police wanted to make sure, because they really hated this Polish author and adventurer. He exposed the real face of Vladimir Lenin and what the communists are. His memory was subsequently erased almost completely in Russia and as much as possible in Poland. And Asendovsky was well known in Europe before then. We will come back to his biggest mystery yet, but now we need to talk about the Bloody Baron and his quest, because there is a very interesting connection to these underground cities and a few other things. I have researched a tremendous amount of published work about the man who was described as a maniac, a mystic, a cruel and aloof man. Robert Nicholas Maximilian Baron Ungern von Sternberg was born in 1886 in Austria. Later the family moved to Revel, now it's Tallinn in Estonia. He was a German aristocrat who grew up in Russia, a Protestant among Eastern Orthodox Christians, who devotedly practiced Lamaist Buddhism. You see, his grandfather was a pirate in the Indian Ocean. Later he was exiled to Siberia, and in Siberia he converted to the Eastern religion. Ungern's family was over 1,000 years old. The Baron's ancestors included crusaders, knights, pirates, alchemists, military commanders, Huns, Teuton Germans, Hungarians. Ungern changed his first name to Roman while applying to a Russian naval college. He was a less than mediocre student. He missed the Russia-Japanese War. He studied in a prestigious infantry college. Later he joined a Cossack military unit in Siberia, and within a year became a skilled rider. His colleagues said that Harunji, or junior lieutenant in Cossack troops, Baron, loved war as others love cards, wine, and women. He was a hot-tempered duelist, heavy drinker, and he also used hard drugs. His superior described him as a pale, haggard-looking blond man of medium height, full of health and energy, who lived for warfare. He did not recognize discipline. He wasn't really an officer, but like an amateurish guerrilla type, who was dirty, ragged, and slept on the floor among his Cossack troops. A strike by his adversary's sword almost broke his skull and left him with a deep scar, horrible headaches, and anxiety attacks. He was a strange man. Once he crossed the wild, impenetrable boreal forest, taiga, on a bed, with only a horse and a rifle. That's thousands of miles, by himself, among wild animals. Ungern visited Mongolia in 1913, where he planned but failed to establish a celibate order of military Buddhists, and to join the legendary Tibetan strongman, outlaw, and tantric monk Jalama, who fought against Chinese Republican forces. Later, Ungern was fighting the battlefields of World War I. He was a fierce and fatalistic cavalry officer, a Yesaul, or a Cossack major, who rarely took prisoners. Soon after, he was arrested and thrown into a military prison for savagely beating a subordinate while being drunk. He left the prison months after the February Revolution in Russia, when Tsar was deposed, and he left for Siberia, joining the mission of Ataman, Cossack chief Semyonov. The Baron used the opportunity to form his own force, the Asiatic Division. When the Russian Civil War commenced, Mongols, Kharachin, Buryats, Bashkirs, Koreans, former imperial officers, Kazakhs, criminals, and others joined the division, about 800 swords strong. This was to grow into a pan-Asian counter-revolutionary army. Sometime later, Semyonov promoted the Bloody Baron to the rank of Major General, and they controlled the Transbaikal area. But later, Semyonov publicly disavowed himself from the violent and brutal Ungarn, who established feudal conditions and cruel reign in Dauria, the area of Siberia ruled by him. There were no more constraints against the Ungarn's ambitions. His deeds earned him the name of the Bloody Baron, and he was recognized as a capable military commander and a pathologically cruel warlord. In all this wild territory, Siberia, Far East, war, bloodshed, secret police, different movements fighting each other, and gold. The discipline of the division was maintained by vicious Mongolian-style bamboo beatings. Deserters, prisoners of wars, larcenous merchants and others were crippled and beaten to death. As favorite spectacle at the division was the so-called Chinese torture, as well as placing victims on ice and red-hot metal roofs. Corpses of the victims were left in the hills for wild beasts to feast on. Ungarn liked to ride alone there, among bones and skeletons, surrounded by vicious howls of Dauria's wolves and wild dogs. He instilled fear and terror on purpose, to promote legends of his invincibility. The Baron ruled with an iron hand. He had no staff, no friends, had no interest in women, he kept to himself. Ungarn hated and punished profiteers, prostitutes and alcoholics. After all the investigation, it was established that beside the Jewish pogrom in 1921, the Baron ordered execution of 3 families with children, as well as some former allies. And he also ordered several public beatings. The Bolsheviks, the communists, they were trying to create an ideal kingdom of their own, and the so-called new men. Now, they shed rivers of blood in Russia. And the White Guard armies who were fighting against them, they had their own atrocities too. But Ungarn was just more exotic than his enemies. This Bloody Baron possessed virulent and calculated hatred for Jews, and he proclaimed it openly. He believed that the Russians, Slavs, were degenerating physically, mentally, and morally, and the Jews, unless stopped, would dominate Russia. He wanted to fill the vacuum left by degeneration in Russia and with his renderings of Buddhism, and deemed himself to be reincarnation of Genghis Khan. Ungarn wore the ancient conqueror's ring, a present for Bogdo-Gegen. Ungarn wanted to conquer and unite all of Eurasia, create a new empire from the Volga River to the Pacific and Indian Oceans. He would start with the establishment of Greater Mongolia, then conquer and incorporate China, where Republican forces deposed the ruling Qin dynasty, and unite the nomads. The yellow race, various nations and tribes, must conquer the white race, he believed. All Jews must be annihilated, monarchy must be restored in the world, European or Western culture was doomed and accompanied by international revolutions that had to be stopped. East had to confront West. Those were his beliefs. And unlike the mainstream leaders of the anti-communist Russian forces, he was a determined monarchist. Ungarn wore a yellow Mongol robe with general's epaulets. Mongol nobility proclaimed him to be a Wan prince. He married a Chinese Qin princess in 1919, but sent her to her family right after the wedding, and later he divorced her. He had no interest in women. He had astrologers and fortune tellers in the division. Tsagan Burhan, war deity, was the name that the Mongols gave Ungarn, who was to them the embodiment of Mahakala, a Lamaist deity. But to attract Russian Slavs, he promised to restore the imperial throne to Grand Duke Mikhail Romanov, the younger brother of the executed Tsar. And Ungarn lied that the man escaped his brother's fate and was in a safe hiding place. Now, most of the nomads did not share Ungarn's ideas. so he used the Russians to command the indigenous forces. But his troops trusted their demonic leader and fought against the Reds fiercely until August of 1921. It's very likely that the Baron decided to attack Urga, controlled by Chinese Republican forces, on request of the Japanese Empire and its Chinese monarchist puppets. Ungarn even had a Japanese unit in the division, and the Empire shared his hatred of the West. But Tokyo underestimated him and his designs for his own empire. It took Ungarn 3 attempts, but he finally captured the city. Today it's Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia's capital. I was in February of 1921. Imprisoned by Republican Chinese, this displayed living Buddha, Bogdo Gegan, former ruler of Mongolia who renounced the throne, now he was set free. And the bloody Baron became dictator of Mongolia, although he proclaimed Bogdo Gegan to be the emperor. Ungarn's brief reign in the city underscored what future might hold for Eurasia and beyond, should he succeed with his nation-building experiment. Ungarn and his troops began systematic hunt and the horrendous murder of Jews in Urga on the night of February 5th. Rapes, tortures, and beatings preceded the killings. No Jewish seed was to be left behind. The Mongols who lived in Urga could not understand why some Europeans would exterminate other Europeans. They never knew Jews to be enemies of the yellow race. 50 Jews were massacred that night by Ungarn's troops. Very few were saved by their neighbors. A few months later, the Baron announced the start of his expedition against Soviet Russia and merciless struggle against Bolshevism. Ungarn wanted to cut off Far East provinces from the rest of Soviet Russia, later to attack China, take over Tibet, make peace with the British, and create his empire. The Reds has subjected Russia to their own vicious rule and atrocities, and revolts and uprising against the Bolsheviks engulfed Siberia. Ungarn expected help from the anti-communist peasants in Siberia, assistance from the Japanese Empire, and support from Ataman Semyonov. But just few thousand anti-Bolshevik guerrillas joined him. Ungarn attacked a number of unprotected towns in Taiga. However, his military fortune fizzled, and the Red Army crushed the Asian Division. Ungarn decided to retreat to Tibet, but his Russian officers revolted. They were not able to kill him, although they tried to. And the trusted Mongol troops bound him up in his sleep and abandoned in the area, in awe and fear. The Red troops finally found him alone in a tent. Eventually, after interrogations, he was placed before a military tribunal. Ungarn did not deny anything except serving the Japanese, and was unrepentant, and repeated his program to massacre all Jews, give the throne to Mikhail Romanov, and restore the land to nobility. Those present at the tribunal averted his gaze full of burning fire. He was given the death penalty. Bolshevik dictator Lenin personally wanted him to die. Before he was executed, the bloody Baron chewed his Order of St. George, a highly prized Russian military decoration, and swallowed the pieces. He was shot in the head, executed in Novonikolaevsk. Now it's Novosibirsk, one of the best scientific towns in Russia. And yet, during the unusually polite interrogation, Ungarn was lecturing the Reds how they can cross the Gobi Desert to join with the revolutionaries in South China. Many white Russians who had experienced Ungarn's rule and conduct of the Asian Division were left disappointed, disgusted, and in despair. They welcomed the news of his death. Because of Ungarn's defeat of the Republican Chinese forces in Mongolia, he made it easy for the communists to conquer that country. His life's goal was a fiasco. The demonic baron was as merciless as his enemies in the Soviet secret police, and his blood-splattered life served as an example to Hitler, who became his own bloody rule 15 years later. Now, about that gold. Ungern had amassed a sizable fortune. Under Semyonov, he was in charge of the gold mines in the area. Both warlords had attacked Admiral Kolchak's and the Bolshevik supply trains. Later, he robbed 2 Chinese banks of gold and precious stones. Excuse me. Many Russian, Chinese, and other merchants were robbed when the Asian Division captured Urga. 15 million rubles in gold coins were kept in barons' boxes. 200 camels comprised the gold caravan laden with Ungern's treasures. There was also a statue of Buddha made from pure gold. Rumors had it that Ungern also captured some of the train cars that carried gold of the Russian treasury. His trusted people, led by Subyesaul Yergonov, the Buryat, they hid the treasures well, including Ungern's personal chest. And those who did the digging to hide the treasures were shot dead, so they don't betray the sites. Well, there was a well-known Russian journalist and expert on Mongolia, Persian, and he mentioned in his memoirs that one site is located in Zheltura. Actually, over 40 cases of gold and silver were buried in 4 locations in that area. In the 1930s, one local dweller dug out a wallet with gold and silver coins and a Kazakh sword. But people found out about this years later. Another legend has it that when the Red troops chased Ungern, he ordered that all the gold and gems be dropped into the waters of Orkhon by Erdeni Jew monastery. In 1989, a newspaper in Mongolia reported that Asindovsky published a map where one such site near Naran Tologoy was revealed. Also, 2 former White Guards soldiers informed a French adventurer who lived in Mongolia in the 1920s that they knew locations of the treasure sites. The NKVD, Soviet secret police, detained Jules Persandier. He revealed one treasure site and it was removed. No one knows where it was taken. Persian believes that the NKVD stole it, and the Frenchman disappeared in 1927. There have been persistent rumors among the locals that Baron Ungern von Sternberg hid his treasures at the bottom of Issyk-Kul Lake in Kyrgyzstan. At least a dozen expeditions, Mongolian, Soviet, and joint ones, even some Russian emigre expeditions, they searched for the elusive treasures there, and also in China, by Lake Buir Nur, by Halhingol River, and by Amur River. Another legend told of Ungern's people who buried the treasure in the plains 160 kilometers from Hailar, Lake Buir Nur vicinity, when they were fleeing from Red troops. The GPU, another name for the KGB, looked through archives and interrogated local people, and Persian, the expert I told you about, he was one of them. Another site where treasures could be buried was rumored to be in Gumbum, a Tibetan monastery. When Ungern captured Urga from the Chinese, he sent his trusted people to Tibet to find the kingdom of Agharti. He was certain that ancient giants, 3 meters tall, sleep there in the bowels below the surface. The second expedition never came back. The first expedition came back with a letter from Dalai Lama. I have videos about the so-called underwater humanoids in Eurasia, and you will see mention of this so-called sleeping 3 meters tall or 9 feet giants. This is very interesting because I've done my own investigation and it's tremendously important because such giants have been cited elsewhere and in modern times. But let me continue about the Bloody Baron. The fact of his expeditions were confirmed in early 1950s when a Mongolian Lama revealed the story to Mikhail Demidenko, Soviet translator and advisor with the Red Chinese troops. Demidenko, the future writer, believed that the underground kingdoms, Shambhala and Agharti, where the master of horror reigned, are nothing more than the products of popular imagination, and Hitler's expedition to Tibet to find such kingdoms were caused by the German Führer's sick psyche. But Demidenko later also met a very interesting Mongolian monk who told him about the findings in the caves of Tibet. And I mentioned the story in my video about the underwater humanoids. Now, some Russians believe that Agharti is located in South Siberia, in the area of western Sayan Ridge. It forms the eastern continuation of the Altai Mountains. The hints are found in Asintovsky's book, where he mentions the Amil, ancient Mongol legends of the underground kingdom of Agharti, the Lake Nogan Kul, and the Smoking Gate that served as the entrance to the mysterious kingdom. There are two lakes in the area of Nogan Hall Passage in the southern portion of the Muzur Taiga Ridge, in the valley of Chingaham River at the left tributary. It is the second, the larger lake, that may hide the treasures, or Agharti. Curiously, Ungern did not consider the area to be the site of the underground kingdom. Here's some other information from Russia, and it talks about this so-called underground country of Agharti, which probably is located under the Gobi Desert in Mongolia and China, Tibet and Himalayas. There was a French esoteric writer, Marquis Saint-Yves d'Alverder, who wrote a book about his mission to India. It was published in 1910. Now, he claimed that all the information about Agharti were received from the Afghan Prince Haji Sharif, who was the messenger of the worldwide occult government, and that this land, underground land, extends from Afghanistan to Burma, that it represents a center with caves down below, whose population is 20 million people, and that in its bowels there are manuscripts that contain the history of humanity, which are written on stone tablets. And according to the Frenchman, Agharti collected a legacy of the ancient San dynasty, which lived in Ahodia and is actually continuation of Vivaswata, Manu of the current cycle. There is other interesting information about what Asindovsky knew from the Mongols. Apparently he was given information by Gelun Lama and Prince Chultun Beyli. According to them, over 60,000 years ago, some ancient saint hid with his tribe underground. During the long years of living underground, these people have reached heights of knowledge which we cannot even imagine. Now it's a populous kingdom with multi-million population of people. There is a system of caves and tunnels which goes and extends underground throughout the planet. They say that the ruler of this underground kingdom is the king of the world, according to them, and that the capital of Agharti reminds of Lhasa and the palace of Dalai Lama, which is on the mountain, and that the palace of this king of the world is in the center of the circle made from palaces, and that there are unknown vehicles that the underground people or dwellers used to race about the roads inside our planet. Apparently there are many people and tribes that live in Agharti. In the deep caves they have their own illumination, which actually allows them to grow fruits and vegetables, and people live there for a long time and don't know any diseases. And educated, highly educated pundits write their knowledge on stone tablets, knowledge of our planet and other planets. According to the information that Asendovsky received from another Lama, who was the keeper of the library of the living Buddha in Urga, there were many people who visited Agharti, but all of them kept silence and did not reveal what they knew. And when the people called Olet destroyed Lhasa, one of the units which acted in that area got to the adjacent areas of Agharti, and that's where they received secret knowledge. This is very interesting because according to people who study this, that the existence of Agharti can be found in ancient Indian, Buddhist and medieval manuscripts and records. And for example, in Ramayana in India, they talk about Rama, who was the seventh avatar of Vishnu, and he arrived from Agharti on the celestial vehicle. In the ancient story of the Mongols, which dates back to 1141, there is a story about Chinggis Khan, who went to the mountains of Kunlun, and how he met with the people who live in the vast caverns underground. And there was an interesting writing from an Italian, Plano Carpini, in 1247, when he describes such meetings and more. There were others who believed in the existence of the underground tunnels under the Gobi Desert. And I want to tell you that from my research, I believe that Ivan Yefremov, that mysterious Soviet scientist that the KGB later considered to be an alien, anyway, he knew quite a lot about Mongolia, which I stated in my other videos. And I also read Nikolai Rurich's writings about strange people who come from the underground areas under Mongolia. I'm sure there is much more to discover, but I wanted to let you know that there is this, you can call it paranormal phenomenon, in the faraway lands of Mongolia, China, Siberia, and I'm sure we'll find out much more. Thank you.